Okay, today we're here in the art room. We're going to go over how the potter's wheel works and what they call throwing a pot. Okay, it's not actually taking the clay and throwing the pot. Okay, it's turning it out on a potter's wheel they call throwing a pot, a clay pot. Okay, all right. A few materials we'll need here is we'll need various tools. So various clay tools. I just picked a couple, actually a plastic one, a wood one. I picked a triangular wire one, a kind of semi-round to a point, and then a smaller triangle tool. All right, and it all depends on what type of a design you're trying to achieve in your pot. Okay, for the first pot that you throw, I would suggest you do something just really simple, just so you get the feel of how it works, and then you slowly work your way up to designing one off of what you find online. Okay, and hopefully, or preferably, not that difficult until you get much better at it. All right, we have a couple of trying to think of the technical term. We'll just call them clay pot removers. Okay, so this will remove the clay pot from the potter's wheel. Okay, we have a in this case just like a fish wire cutter. So this will remove or cut the bottom of the clay pot so you can remove it from the wheel. Fairly large sponge. The large sponge is for cleanup. And then I like to have a couple of small sponges. Okay, and all this equipment's located over behind my desk in a drawer. The large sponges I usually just take and will throw them after emptying the bucket of water back in the bucket, so then they're really easy to find and use. Okay, so I use a couple of small sponges. I'll have a bucket. There's two buckets underneath on the bottom shelf of the shelves over in the corner by the kiln. Okay, and you want about 3/4 of a bucket of water, and it's just water straight out of the sink over there. And I'll take the two sponges and throw those in there. The small sponges, the big sponge stays off to the side until we're ready for it. Okay, I have a masonite board. Grab a masonite board with some burlap on it so I can knead the clay. Okay, I don't know, a handful of newer clay. The newer clay works best. Okay, our potter's wheel. Come around the corner here a little bit. The potter's wheel has a guard. Okay, that'll sit right here on the tray. The easiest way to clean this is take it right over the sink and rinse it off. Okay. And then just bring it back over here and set it just like that, so it's ready for the next person to use. This guard you need to pick up, and it goes right underneath. There's a couple of brackets underneath here, okay, hooks, and this will slide right up in there. It sits behind the wheel. What that'll do is it'll catch all the clay slag that comes off as this thing's turning, okay, and potentially keeps from a big mess from happening. All right. A lot of your clay and water will also collect here on the tray. Okay. I tend to, as a clay pot worker, I tend to use a lot of water. So you'll see my work surface has a ton of water on it. That's why I use 3/4 of a bucket. Do what works for you. If you use a lot of water, fine. If you don't use a lot of water, whatever works. Okay, for me, a lot of water works. All right, I also have a arch smock, and the arch smock behind is tied. And then this one here is nice because it goes down the leg, which you'll find out for a guy like me works good. And I want to make sure I tie them off at the bottom, right? So that they're not long stringy hanging down. The reason for that is when this wheel's moving, we don't want it to wrap up in there. Okay? Potter's wheel consists of a chair, the plate, the guards, table, and then there's I think it's a granite stone at the bottom, and it's heavy. It acts as a counterweight so that when you push it once, it doesn't take too much and it keeps spinning and spinning and spinning. Okay? Very simple. Alright, come closer. We're going to take our clay. The first process we're going to do is we're going to knead the clay out. Now for kneading the clay, we've done this at this point, hopefully, for a sculpture piece before we get to this point. A couple sculpture pieces probably. And kneading the clay, you knead it about, 10, 15, 20 times. I've kneaded this one out about 20 different times, so I'll just show you the process quick, and then we'll go to the wheel. All right, so for kneading a piece of clay out, I always hold with my palm on the end, hold the other side of the clay, and then push with the one hand, and I push in like a spiral motion. Okay, and with the spiral motion, you can see the clay start to coil. See the clay start to coil? And that's good, we want it to coil like that. Because what it does is it starts working the air out of the clay. On the potter's wheel, that's something that you definitely want to have happen. You want all the air out of the clay. Because as you go to spin the clay, okay, it'll bring all the air pockets out, and then it'll potentially fall apart on the clay or on the wheel if it's not needed all the way out. Okay. Alright, so again, I already needed this for the most part. I like to take and make it like a triangular shape with a fairly flat bottom. Okay, so triangular shape with a fairly flat bottom. Very simple. I'm going to bring my bucket of water over the wheel. Set it on one of the edges. Okay? For this purpose, I'm going to set it down first. Alright, but I'd set it there on the edge. I have my two sponges, and then I have my clay, and I should be set to go. Okay? Excuse me, I'm not. I also have my tools in case I need them. Alright, now, we want to put this wedge of clay onto the potter's wheel centered as much as possible. Okay, it won't be perfectly centered, but we want to get as close as possible. So the first step we're going to do is we're actually going to center the clay. Alright, so the closer you have it centered by the first step of putting it down, the less work you have to do to get the clay centered then after that. Okay? So I'm just going to go, there's actually a divot, if you want to come closer here. There's a divot here in the center of the wheel, that's your actual center. So we want to make sure we put the clay down on top of that. Now, I like to drop the clay fairly hard on this. Okay? When I sit on the potter's wheel, I just kind of straddle the plate. Okay? And I always like to rest, I'm right-handed, so I spin the wheel with my right foot. So I always rest my left foot on, there's a piece of steel that goes around the outside. I rest it out there. And then that allows me to spin the wheel with my other foot. Okay? Alright, so I straddle the piece. I take my clay, and I'm going to try to place it down there as centered as possible. And when I approximately get it to the point I want it, I lift it back up, slap it down on there. Now at this point it's stuck, right? Okay, if your wheel is wet, the clay won't stick down. Alright, so we want to start with a dry plate and then stick the semi-wet clay to the plate. Again, if there's water on the plate, it won't stick right. And then you go to spin the clay, it'll come right off. Okay? Now at this point, this is where I like to have quite a bit of water. Okay, because I find if I don't have a lot of water, the clay will stick to my hands, and when the clay sticks to your hands, guess what that'll eventually do? Well, it'll make the clay peel off the wheel, right? Because the clay is sticky. With water, it's not so sticky. Alright? Okay, for this part, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come around so you can see. I'm going to work the clay up and back down, and then back up and back down about 3 different times. Okay? And you can use whatever processes work best for you. I like to try to keep my hands locked in some way, shape, or form. Okay? Because it helps keep them a little bit sturdier. And I always rest my forearms here on the tray. Okay? And it helps me work this clay. Now you got to use a little bit of muscle, obviously, with this process to make this happen. Because the clay just isn't going to just give up and work for you. Okay? You have to work against the clay. You work against the clay too hard, you allow it to get too dry, it comes off the wheel. Okay, then you have a big long cleanup process, get the plate dry, knead out more clay, and or the clay that you already have, you add drier clay to it. Okay, because you can't have really wet clay either. And then you restart. Alright? Okay. Now, I have quite a few years of experience doing this, so I make it look fairly easy. Alright, when you get to this potter's wheel and you start doing this, it is not going to be easy. You're going to be frustrated at first. Okay, allow yourself to keep practicing. Eventually, it'll come to you. Alright, Try different techniques. Like I said, I like to try to keep at all times hands locked together. When I actually pull the clay up into a pot formation, I use 2 fingers on the outside, 2 on the inside, and I tend to keep the inside fingers slightly higher than the outside, pulling the clay up. Okay, and you'll see how that works as I get to that point. All right. Now I always drop just, a good amount of water on top of the clay. All right. Now I always keep a wet sponge in my right hand, because again I'm right-handed. Okay, I'm gonna push on the side with the side of my palm, and on top I'm gonna push with the edge of my hand. And I'm gonna start pushing down first. Now, as I'm doing this, I have the sponge in my hand. I can squeeze it and allow more water to come out, right? Okay, and I'm pushing it so it's almost down like a flat plate kind of. Okay, so you see how now when I get a lot of buildup on my hands, I like to scrape it off use my sponge to get all the excess off. I'm kind of a type of potter's wheel person. I like to keep my hands real clean. Some people doesn't really bother them. Okay. Now at this point I'm just going to push in from the edges. I'm going to start working the clay up. Okay, and you see how it's starting to center the clay on the wheel? And again, I start with a fairly larger clump of clay than I feel I'll need, just because I lose a lot by the really wet stuff coming off of my hands. Okay, you notice where I have my sponge, right? And I squeeze it and it drips water. That's what I want, because as I spin this, okay, it tends to start to dry out. That's where I get stuff on my hands. Two or three times I'm going to do this process down. Work the clay down and then back up just to make sure I have it centered.
How do you make it go down and push it?
Yeah. I'm pushing with this arm really hard down on it. And pulling in with this hand, right? Okay, start to center it. Now, if you're thinking, oh, this is supposed to be comfortable, my legs aren't going to hurt, well, dream on. As you're sitting here spinning this wheel, your leg starts to get tired too. Okay? It's not a comfortable process. Okay, this is my second time. Like I said, this is my second time coming back up here. Like I said, I've done this a few times, so I'm going to stop at centering it by going down back up just twice. You guys probably want to go 3 times at least. Okay? Okay, I'm going to start my pot. And it doesn't matter where you, or what clay formation you start your pot from. Okay, I like to start it, you know, fairly as wide as it's going to be when I want it pulled up, right? Okay, so as I pull this up, this is about how wide it's going to start. If I want it to start smaller diameter, I just push the clay in further and then start pulling it. Make sense? Okay, so like I said, if I wanted it to be skinnier, push the clay in a little further. Okay, so smaller diameter. Simple. And a lot of this you just got to do by just getting used to doing it. Okay? Some of this you just, you know, there's no set measurements or standard procedure of doing this. You just, okay, by time after time and time again of spitting out a pot. Okay, so first step I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to start at the very top of my my clump of clay. I'm going to start at the very top with a couple fingers. I'm going to push all the way down, okay, in the very center until I get about a 1/4 of an inch thickness at the bottom. Okay? Remember what I said about real thick pieces, and we've learned at this point about thick pieces in the kiln, what happens? They explode. So if I don't go down far enough in this pot and I leave the base too thick, guess what's going to happen to the base in the kiln? It'll explode. Whereas the top may be thin enough and that it won't. Okay, so I got to make sure that I'm thin enough all the way down through. Now to test that, we actually have some tools that are like little pointers. They're like little sticks. They almost look like a toothpick. You can actually put that down in there and push it down in. And I always use my thumb and go down to the base of the clay and then pull the pointer out, and however much is sticking out, that's how thick the clay is, right? So you can use one of those to gauge it. I've done enough pots where I really don't need to gauge this. Okay, I know how thick the base is supposed to be, so. Okay, and you'll peel off clay. Now it doesn't hurt to have a puddle of water in the middle of this pot. Okay, there I actually felt bottom, so I went a little too far. Okay, so this one here I'd have to redo it. Some shots. It'll have a hole in the bottom of it. Which is fine because I'll just make it into a pot for a plant or something. Okay. Pot for a plant, you know, it's got to have water drain out the bottom. Otherwise the soil stays saturated with water. So to put a hole is fine. Alright, now what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to...
It needs to be done by Mother's Day.
I don't know. Depends on how well you can do it. Okay, I'm going to start pushing with my inside hand, pushing out. And then with my outside hand, and both inside and outside, pulling up at the same time. It's been a while since I've actually done a clay pot also. Okay. And as I do this, you can kind of start to gauge approximately how thin the walls are getting. Okay, just by feel you should be able to kind of tell, hopefully. And I like to wet the inside of the pot at the same time as I'm getting the outside, because the clay starts to get sticky. And when this clay gets sticky, that's how it starts falling apart, right? Okay, and I like to, and my process is to make the bottom thinner and leave the top thicker. Okay? Not real thin on the bottom, because otherwise it'll fall as it's too thick on top. But I like to leave it thicker on the top, because then once I get the bottom thin enough, then I can start pulling the top out. Okay, now this here is by far, real far from being done. But what I'm going to do, just for the fact of saving some time, because I got to show you cleanup here. Okay, I'm going to show you what this looks like without the water on it. Okay, if you wring the sponge out, the sponge will collect the water. Make sense? Okay, now I can leave my finger grooves in it, which I think is kind of cool, or I can smooth it out by just taking the sponge, the damp sponge. Okay, same with on the inside. And I can make it nice and smooth. Okay, I always like my finger grooves to seal. It's kind of cool. Alright, now to clean off this, just for part of cleanup, to clean off this wheel, you just take the dryer sponge and you just, okay, and it cleans the wheel up for you. Very simple. Now have a nice clean wheel. Okay, you see all the water I have here? I'm going to make sure I sponge that up with a bigger sponge. Alright, now, you see my bottom has like a, you can come closer with that camera. The bottom has like, it's mushroomed out, right? Okay, we can get that to not be mushroomed out, and that we just take one of our tools, depending on which tool works best for you. Okay, and you spin the potter's wheel, and I can start wherever I want it to not be fanned out, and I can start cutting. Okay, I cut all the way out. Alright, and then I can take my wire, or that pointer tool I was talking about, which I don't have out here. Either one will work. And I just want to cut this outside ring, not into the pot itself. Okay. I can take and remove this. Okay, and I'm just shaping this thing up. Oh. So it looks nicer, except I didn't want to do that. Okay, so I just shape the outside of it up so it looks the way I want it to look. Okay? Now, we can take and we can, for removal, alright, I can take my string. Okay, I can put it down underneath here. You see how I'm holding it? I'm holding it wrapped around fingers and then pushing with 2 fingers down against the wheel. Okay, I just take and I spin it just a little bit, pushing right underneath the clay pot, and it just cut it off the wheel. Now, if I was to take and grab a hold of this and move, right? Okay, if I take and just grab it, it's going to squish up. So that's where these little guys here. Okay, and I make sure my board is over here. Right? At the same time, I'm going to put it back down here because I'm going to show you cutting in half. So you can see what too thick is. When your hands are all dirty like this, it's hard to work this stuff. Okay, and I take these guys here, and I push them in from the sides. Right? Once it dries, then I want to carve my name either in the bottom or in the inside, either one. Okay, and I set it on the wooden board. Okay, now, for the sake of seeing how thick this is, we can take and and if you want to do a test one like this, it's fine. Take and cut it in half. Okay. Alright, so you see how much thinner it is at the top? And at the very bottom it's really thick. That's because I'm pushing and pulling up, right? That's why I want to push at the bottom and try to get it as thin as possible and then pull up. Okay? This is too thick. That'll explode in the kiln right there. Make sense? So this pot obviously needed significantly more work. Alright, my suggestion would be is you practice this 2 or 3 different times. Not having a finished product yet, you cut it in half, check it out. Okay, eventually you'll get better at it and then you'll be able to do a finished product. Okay? Alright, clean up. If it's something that didn't work out, this is good wet clay to put something that's dry. Okay, so this can just all be put together, and it can be maybe possibly kneaded out a little bit, okay, to make it a solid ball again, and it can be put back in with the regular clay. Alright? Put it up here because I'll need this one out. Back. Alright. Clean up, I use between the smaller sponges and the bigger sponge. I can go clean my water up in my bucket here. May help. Okay. What I tend to do is I like to use a lot of water, but at the same time not use too much water so it goes all over the floor. If it's all over the floor, then you have to sponge up the floor too. Okay, but in this case I didn't use too much. I can take all my tools if they're dirty. At this point these ones really aren't. I can put them in my bucket, take them over to the sink, clean those. I want to make sure I clean these up over in the sink. Alright. This tool actually is. I'll throw that in there. My wire, I'm going to clean that up, so I'll throw that in the bucket too. Okay. I'm going to get everything off the wheel itself. Somebody want to grab me that bigger sponge? The bigger sponge is going to work great for cleaning up the table. Alright, so I can just soak up all this water on the table. Key thing is to not get it all over, running down the side of the wheel so it goes on the ground. Okay, so you see how I sponge it up and then I just squeeze it off into the bucket. Okay, now this is by far clean. This is going to leave a film, so I'm going to want to clean my bucket of water up. Okay, and then come back. There, I just spilt some on the floor. Okay, there we go. I got the majority of that off. Okay. Now at this point I'd take my bucket over, I'd clean it out, bring over a new bucket of water, clean it up again. Okay, I take my little tray right here. The key is as you take it off, tip it back. Okay? And I can take this right over to the sink over there and dump this out also. Now, my tray didn't get overly dirty, so I can just do it right here. I said I didn't finish this one up, so that's why the tray isn't overly dirty. If I finished this clay piece up, it would have been probably pretty bad. Let me get under here where I couldn't get with the tray sitting in there. Okay, and again, I'll go clean my water, come back one more time. If I have to, I can get around the edge of the wheel. Alright, and then this will sit right there and done. Take this over, clean it all up in the sink. If there's big clumps of clay inside this bucket, okay, just hold on to those and we can mix it in with some drier stuff, right? Okay, don't let it try to go down the sink because it won't go down the sink. Now, if they're really bad and really wet and mushy and it doesn't seem like we can salvage them, then we'll pick them out of this bucket and just throw them in the garbage. Because again, if we try to make it go down the sink, it'll plug the drain all up. We don't want that. Okay? Questions here? Questions on how to spin a pot on the wheel? Okay, questions clean up, simple. All the tools. We should know at this point, hopefully, where all the tools are located. So we've gone over that. Very simple. Okay? Again, key thing is don't give up. Keep trying it. Keep trying it. Keep trying it. At the end of the hour, make sure you leave at least 5 minutes in order to get clean up. Okay? Because it take easily 5 minutes to get this cleaned up. Simple? Last questions. Good?